right, double it up. Hey, hey everybody. It's great to see you guys and great to be back on the stage again. I always love it. Always so many smart people in the room with lots of money to spend on awesome stuff. So if you want to buy anything from us, let us know.
I do.
So Jeff, I want to kind of kick off real quick. I think it's super important for us just to kind of get an understanding of why even Basis and why did you guys actually initially start this company? What was the purpose?
It was real simple. We were trying to figure out how to help people live better lives. I mean, literally at the fitness kind of health and a more kind of holistic version of health than strictly fitness, although that's clearly where kind of the core of the market is today. And I think the early insight was you can't do that if you can't complete the loop, right? If you can't feedback what people are actually doing versus what they should be doing versus what you're telling them to be doing. So that led us down to, okay, we've got to be able to track stuff. And then our founder, Nadeem, really early on, just had the insight that just simply tracking what people are doing at this sort of gross like step count level just wasn't really that insightful at a physiological level. So his insight was we need to get to the physiology. We need to get to actual body signals. What's the body doing? And that ultimately led us down to we need to be able to get to things like heart rate kind of being one of the most fundamental biosignals that you can get at. Tells you a lot about both your long-term health as well as the kind of in the moment what you're doing. So that was the big mission. How do we get heart rate in something that people could actually wear 24/7, not a chest strap that people are going to wear for the 30 minutes of their run, but really your whole life. And so ultimately that led us to wearables like Basis.
So I think it's really important, and for the audience to understand that there's a notable difference in the wearable CEO versus CEOs of past technologies, and it's how he started off the question. It's we wanted to help people. We wanted to make people live better lives. I think one of the key components of successful wearable CEOs, of the world, like either it's Manisha Prakash or Tom Lee or Sunny Vu or Eric Majakovsky, like all you guys always kind of start with the user first. And that's the most important piece. So there's this undercurrent of empathy that I think makes these wearable executives great executives in building successful products. Like, do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in every category, not just wearables, the management team and all of the team really being oriented around the user experience and what's fundamentally going to make us valuable to these users and deliver on the overall mission. That always helps. But I will recognize. I mean, I've sat on lots of panels with some of the very people that you've mentioned and more. There is a real sincerity in this category. A lot of the people that I have met, they just have this real earnestness about what we're trying to do.
No asshole policy for wearable executives is great.
I'm not sure if it's universally true, but it's mostly true.
Yeah, that's great. So something happened on the way in your guys' journey. It's an acquisition. And
little milestone along the way.
little thing kind of happened. Yeah. There was some negativity about that. And it's really weird because I remember like the early days of this generation of mobile, we had a $50 million, $40 million acquisition, and everyone lost their shit. They were so excited. It's great. But Basis gets acquired, and everybody's like, oh,
was it early?
Sorry, Jeff. You get condolences. Tell us a little bit about the acquisition, the why, and let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I mean, we've heard very much both sides, the congrats as well as the was it time. So I guess, for the audience's benefit, a little bit of history at Basis. We were working on that very notion, how do we get at real physiology? How can we get deeper than just tracking steps? We were working on that for quite a while before, anybody out there sort of heard about us. So our journey is kind of longer than it looks like based on, when we hit the press and kind of when people started to really understand Basis. So there's a much longer journey there than kind of a quick exit from when we leapt onto the scene. This really started because somebody approached us. We weren't out there looking. Somebody came in as part of a business development kind of partnership conversation. It escalated. And as a CEO, given who it was and given what we were talking about, it was credible enough, it was interesting enough that you have to bring it to your board. Yeah. And then that starts a really strategic conversation about, is it time now? And honestly, we kind of went into it with probably not. Yep. Let's play this out. Let's see how it goes. Let's see where we would fit. And you start asking yourself the question, not so much, what's the number and is it a good return for the investors? That's certainly part of it, especially at the board level. But you start thinking about what's going to ultimately help us deliver on this mission that we started off on the best and the soonest and the fastest and the biggest. And so, part of this conversation was, does this help us be who we want to be fundamentally faster? In addition to all the, sort of considerations about what's happening in the marketplace, who's coming, what are the rumors of the day, who's going to do what down the road, and where does that leave us? That was part of the thinking, but it was really much more for the employees, for the mission, what's the right platform, the stage for us to be on to achieve that, as well as the numbers. So it was triggered by somebody else that led us down this path of really thinking about it, and ultimately, of course, the deal ended up being done with Intel, who's not who approached us initially, but they were an investor in Basis along the way. So that's how it happened.
Yeah, so I think it needs to be clear, like you guys were fiscally sound, you guys were moving in the right direction. This was a mission-oriented acquisition, more akin to like the focus and the drive of your company towards acceleration of vision.
Yep. Yeah, and when we started having these conversations, we had several of these conversations. Once you decide that you're going to consider this, then you have several of them, and several of them were interesting for various reasons. The things about Intel that were really interesting to us are these. So they already have this new group called the New Devices Group, and that New Devices Group kind of already has the mission that we had, not just about helping people live healthy. We'll continue to do that within NDG, but the point is, we didn't have to convince an acquiring company of our strategy and that it should be important to them. They already got it. They were already investing in it. So we had comfort that if that's our home, that we already fit into an existing strategy that we're going to accelerate, as opposed to, are they committed to this? Did we sell them on something that 2 years from now, they're not going to believe in? So that was a big factor. The other big factors were they wanted us to continue doing exactly what we're doing. They wanted to keep the Basis brand. They wanted to keep the Basis team. They even left us in the exact same office. So there was this what we imagined anyway, this beautiful confluence of you get this much bigger stage, you get literally a global stage. I mean, Intel has relationships, even though we don't think of them in this way, they have relationships with all the biggest retailers in the world. So you get this bigger stage and you sort of get left alone to do your own thing. And there's not very many of these opportunities that come along that allow you that. So it was kind of a bet on maybe that's the right fit, even if it's earlier than we planned.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like just, when you look at the industry, I remember like early days when I was with Scout and we were all struggling to one, get investment, but also like no one was exiting and everybody was like looking like it was doom and gloom. But then all of a sudden, like you start seeing like $50 or $65 million acquisition hits and like in relation to that, I think a lot of the naysayers that were naysaying wearables today were the same guys that were naysaying mobile, but I saw those guys get super excited about the acquisitions that happened, and now they just basically shit all over the acquisition. Oh, this is bad, But now you've got like Oculus Rift, you've got Nest. I include Nest as kind of part of my Internet of Wearable things in my mind. It's kind of nebulous, but it's
a stretchy definition.
It's great for marketing purposes.
Yeah.
So, but you look at a lot of these acquisitions, and I think that we're seeing kind of this rise of wearable technology to come to a relevance of importance before it actually hits the mainstream. Everyone gets it, from the marketing side to the business development side. Like, what are you seeing?
Well, everyone's interested in it anyway.
Yeah. Everyone wants to know what's going on.
Everyone that we talked to in the Valley either has a wearable play that's nascent or knows they need one and they're looking for the investment or the partnership or whatever to make sure they have one. I think it's important to remember we weren't the first exit in the space, right? And maybe this isn't the first one either, but Body Media exited for $100 million basically to Jawbone.
Yeah, another failed acquisition in wearables, right? Yeah.
Post, right, figuring out what's going to happen with that asset now that it's inside of Jawbone is an interesting question, but they were at it for 12 or 14 years before they got to that exit, right? And then we come along, we're on the market for a couple of years. I predict there will be more, right? I mean, there is a lot of companies coming in the wearable space. I mean, you guys all go to the same shows and same conferences. Wearables is on the tip of everybody's tongue. You go to CES and you see this, every year you see this sea of new wearables companies, about half of which never make it to market. Some do, and then they kind of disappear. There are a few that are making it, and those are growing. I guess the question is what's going to happen next, right? With what's happening in smartwatches, with what's happening in mobile, and mobile the phone itself getting more and more powerful and able to do some of these gross tracking things, what's going to happen to the first wave of wearables that became popular, but do they get subsumed, do they get replaced with other devices where the ability to track steps, as an example, is just part of something bigger that those devices do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's you think that how hard it is to disrupt or replace an incumbent software provider or mobile application. How much harder is it to build a wearable device? This is one of your competitors that I probably shouldn't have on. So so how hard is it to to really displace somebody that's been at this for 4 or 5 years, understands the data. I mean, it's really, like, you guys have been at it for a while.
We have, and understanding the data, understanding the user insights, how do you actually turn data into behavior change? And that's one of the things that sort of as a mantra that we've held on to for the last couple of years as we've been in this space. This isn't a tracking category, this is a behavior change category. And tracking is a means to that end, but so is social sciences and psychology and some behavioral sciences, including gamification as one tactic, but this is really a behavior change category. The data drives that, and yes, early players do have some insights into that. I think for me the interesting dynamic here is I don't mean it was easy, because for those of you who are working at startups, particularly hardware startups, where it's very, very capital intensive and the time scales, right? If you get something wrong and you've got to replace the tooling, it's months, not weeks of revving a website or an app. So I don't mean to say that it's easy, but when the early players in this space, including us, started, there were no very, very large players that were really committed to this space. Along came Nike. We can have a separate conversation about them if you like, but to the extent that there were going to be players who emerged and got large, the startups were creating this category. There weren't big companies helping create this category. The interesting question is, as those big players are coming into it, and they clearly are now, Samsung and obviously rumored Apple and Google and others, is will it be easy to replace the incumbents because they have the horsepower, the marketing power, the dollars, the army of resources that those large companies have? I would argue it's going to be easier for those large companies to replace the sort of non-differentiated, commoditized, kind of easier user experiences that the incumbents in the space have today. So those incumbents, the startups among us, we really need to be working on what is the next thing we can do that the big companies are just not going to make the bet on until it's too late.
So I think a lot of that says that mobile is finally a mature market. Maybe I'm immature, that's why I'm not necessarily doing too much of it anymore. But like with it being like this big, vastly mature market, I think a lot of the innovation has actually flowed towards the wearable stuff. So to a group of people that are focused on marketing and focused on marketing plans, I mean, we talk ad nauseum at Wearable World about you missed mobile, don't miss wearables. Mm-hmm. Like, where do you see like the early marketing initiatives? And by the way, every major CPG company in the world has reached out to us to talk about their wearable strategy and where they take their marketing dollars and their budget towards it, every single one. So I think it's really important, if you want that budget, that you have to understand where these guys are coming from. Where do you see like the early marketing wins relevant to CMOs?
Yeah, well, this notion of, you miss mobile or tablets or whatever, make sure you don't miss wearables, that's actually one of the sort of driving principles inside of Intel, and one of the reasons they're making such a huge bet on wearables and companies like Basis and all the stuff they're doing internally. Intel did miss, and they admit this publicly. This is they're very, very sort of transparent and self-honest organization. We are a very transparent and self-honest organization, which is one of the things I appreciate. And they know they got to mobile and tablets late, and they absolutely want to be part of shaping what happens in wearables and not trailing. So one of those comforts that you have as a wearables company. I guess the thing that I would say about this space is, yes, there is now a lot of innovation, a lot of attention, and certainly a lot of hype coming into the wearable space, and has been for a couple of years. That's all very, very exciting. I think from the media angle, I've been engaged in several conversations with marketers, media folks, publishers in this space, and I guess one thing that I'll caution is I tend to feel like people in the media space, the publishing space, are looking at the wearable as the next screen for marketing consumption, for advertising, et cetera. And yes, many wearables have screens. Keep in mind that some of them don't. I guess what I would invite us to think about is, yes, it's certainly plausible to feed a message to the screen, an alert of some kind or some sort of little message nugget that can appear on the screen. It's possible. I don't know how sort of compelling that will be. I guess I would invite media and publishers, et cetera, in this space to think about the wearable and the data that wearables gets, not so much as a screen for consumption, but as creating contextual data to multiply the relevance of the messages that you're already feeding to this user on other platforms, other screens. I mean, we can know, when you went to bed, when you woke up, the quality of your sleep, when you're active. By connecting the device to the phone, you can understand geolocation, you can understand what the consumer ate or drank. I mean, you can understand so much personal context about the user And I would say that's really the value, from a media publishing standpoint, I think that's really the short-term value of wearables, and it's really about exchanging that data and multiplying your relevance, as opposed to here's another 1-inch screen that I can try to put an ad on.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because that's like the major players that get wearables get the understanding of the contextual data, but also making somebody's life easier. I mean, American Airlines, who's a partner of ours that's public, like imagine if you just had a wristband that identified you and you just had to walk right in through. You didn't have to show your ID, you didn't have to show anything, but there's an EEG reading like what BioNim has that understands you are you and there's nobody else like you, according to EEG, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't think that I think we've talked to almost every major retailer too. Everyone senses that there is such a wellspring of data, but it's also a very intimate device.
Yes.
Like this touches human skin on a regular basis. So that's a pun. I didn't mean that. But it touches you, and so there's this direct connection of engagement that's even more deeper than the phone. Like if you want to know how close it is, try to look at a notification. It takes you 8 seconds to pull up and look at a Facebook notification. It takes you about a half a second to do this. Yep. So there's such a deeper, intimate connection to the end user. I liken it to like web pages. If it took us 8 seconds to pull up a web page, we'd freak out. We'd get upset. Wearables has that problem.
Many of the people in this room might not remember, but it did used to take us 8 seconds to render a web page.
What did we do?
We got up for, to get a cup of coffee a lot of the time. So yeah, I think wearables are more intimate. I agree that there's a special relationship with the device, and I think it goes beyond the fact that it's sort of in contact with you and makes alerts more easy. I think the fact that it's wearable, particularly if it's a conspicuous wearable, meaning it's not something that you sort of tuck away in your pocket or on your bra strap. It's something that other people can see you wearing. It's intimate because it really says something about you.
Yeah.
Which means that we makers of wearables have to make sure that it says something about you that you want said about you, right? And that's partly about fashion, it's partly about symbolism, it's partly about, oh, this guy's really into his health and he's sort of taking his health responsibly and he's got the, whatever, the smartest tool for doing it, but it says something about you, and I think it's intimate in that way. I think the important thing for us all to remember, or at least this is my very strong belief in this category, is that mainstream consumers, and so, put your mind outside of Silicon Valley where we're all wearing and always trying the latest things. The mainstream consumer is not just sitting around waiting for the day when they get to wear technology, right? Where they get to wear technology. They're not going to want to wear technology just out of sort of, digital DNA. They're going to have to be convinced to wear technology because it does something for them very, very valuable. And I would argue further that if we're going to make wearable technology, that we have to figure out what it can do because it is worn that just fundamentally can't be done if it's not worn, right? If it's in your pocket. So the bio identity stuff is an example of that. But I think, and the reason that I think that's terribly important, again, going back to sort of the media and the publishing angle that we were at a moment ago, is we have to really be careful about the balance of what we're trying to get in front of the user versus how much we're trying to help the user. Because if that balance, if the ratio gets out of balance, and people feel like we, the community, are pushing more at them than the value they're getting out of wearing the device, they will not wear the device, right? There is not gravity drawing them to wearing a wearable. There's gravity drawing them away from wearing the wearable unless they wake up every day and feel like they got value out of wearing it yesterday. So I think we need to be very conscious of that as we are both designing the use case around our wearables and what we're after, the mission that we're after, as well as how we're going to take advantage of that screen and the data that comes out of it from a media marketing standpoint.
Well, I think that it sums up about everything that we could really kind of break down today. Jeff, I think your guys' journey was incredible. Few people get to a point where they hit the next milestone, which is acquisition, and fewer people even get the freedom to kind of accelerate their vision with a great partner like Intel. So, dude, you guys kick ass.
Well, I think that's the right way to think about it. This is a milestone along the way. Wait to see what we do next.
All right. It's so funny. When did we ever think that an exit was the end of our companies? Right. We're so backwards. Anyways, thank you so much, Jeff.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, audience. I appreciate you.